So, gentlemen, thank you for joining. Some things have happened in the last year since we met, the last 11 months. How much has changed, may I ask? Because a lot can happen without some of the structural factors that you at Cepsa, at Linde are considering having really changed. What's actually changed from the perspective of businesses making decisions in the last 11 months? Any thoughts?
I think that if I take a further step back, I lived in Asia for 10 years. I came back to Europe 3 years ago from China at the time. And when I came back to Europe 3 years ago, everyone was talking about we must do. And then I saw more and more people saying we will do things. And a year ago, I think there was a lot of things more into we are in the process of doing. And I'm very proud to be here today, back, very happy to be back here and saying we have done a number of things. So we are in that process, which I think there also has been a kind of sobering there also. You know, a year ago we saw an enormous amount of MOUs being signed. It was a lot of greenwashing and so on. And I think that we have seen a much more screening, so more realistic things coming out today. I can quickly just share a few things that we have done in our company, and we're working all across this. So we work with energy efficiency, we work with low carbon fuels, we work with carbon capture, and with hydrogen. We're quite big in hydrogen, probably the biggest in merchant hydrogen. So we work a lot with big steel companies for energy efficiency, with Baowu, with ArcelorMittal, and so on. If you look at low carbon fuels, sustainable aviation fuel, for example, that Miguel is very much into as well. We work with Fulcrum in a project now in Nevada with municipal solid waste that we are transforming into sustainable aviation fuel. And then if you look at carbon capture, first time I came across carbon capture was 30 years ago, and not too much has happened. But now, you know, there is something. Maybe it's a ketchup bottle, I don't know, but there is something really happening. So we announced a huge project in Texas with OCI for making, from in our scope, it's about blue hydrogen. So it will be blue ammonia. And we are putting $1.8 billion into that. So that's a big thing connected to IRA, of course. But we announced a few days back a big carbon capture and utilization project with Heidelberg in Germany, in the northern part of Bavaria. It's about capturing about 1 million tons of CO2 a year. So these things are happening, and then you come into hydrogen, right? So we started up 24 megawatt PEM electrolyzer in Leuna in Germany. We announced 2 times 100 megawatts in Lingen in Germany together with REW. We have new cooperation about solid oxide electrolyzers as well. And we see now also the use of hydrogen coming into play. We work together with the steel company Ovako in Sweden, and in August this year, they will start operating the reheat furnaces in the rolling mill using 100% hydrogen in that, as an example. And then we see in the mobility sector, the first ferry boat running on 100% hydrogen is now in operation in Norway. We have in Germany, in Bremerförde, the first train or sets of trains operating with hydrogen there. So we see these things are happening. So I'm happy to say that we have done, right? We still must do, we still will do, and we are in the process of doing. But we can say that we have been doing, and we're coming into another type of landscape, I would say. So very happy to report back, so to speak.
Thank you. I'll come back to you on the sobering realism as well later, but Miguel at Cepsa.
Exactly the same. When we came here last year, we have a brand new strategic plan in order to impulse the decarbonization of the company. And as Joachim just has said, for us it's exactly the same. All the decarbonization levers that has to be actioned in our strategic plan from now to 25 has been actioned with real things that we have been discussing during the breakfast. We have begun with the best. Energy efficiency is the best way to begin the decarbonization pathway. We are impulsing the electrification, first the steam, after the heat thermal oil, and after we will go to process. Also we have impulsed also the transformation of our fossil hydrogen production. And we are impulsing all the decarbonization levers with real investment. That's the biggest difference from our conversation last year. Last year was a strategic plan, this year is real investment. And I think that all European companies, we have understood with the Russian-Ukrainian crisis that we cannot miss this opportunity. Energy transition is a big problem, but also is a big opportunity for the companies that are going to take seriously. That is the only option. To decarbonize our companies is the only option to survive. So I think that this year and next year are going to be critical in order to demonstrate, at least the oil and gas companies, that we are taking seriously our decarbonization pathway, and we have to demonstrate to all our stakeholders that we are doing the right steps in order to do that. Right steps means probably not big steps, but we have to do that very cleverly in order to invest the money required in the right decarbonization levers. Because of that, renewable power, energy efficiency, transforming our fossil hydrogen, biogas, impulsing biogas projects, that are the most clever decarbonization levers that we have today. So let's move on this way and try to maintain profitability, because profitability is the key. If we don't have profitability, we are not going to advance.
So for profitability, move in small, clever steps. Okay.
I think energy transition, there is of course one overarching energy transition, but there are many energy transitions, plural. There are no silver bullets. There are a number of things, and I mentioned my 4 ways of viewing it, which echoes quite well with what Miguel said. We need to work on all these kind of things, and when we come back into frameworks and policymakers and so on, that had to take that into account. It's not only one thing we have to look at. And there are different pace, there are different preconditions at different places that would make it fly, making it profitable as well.
Now, with many transitions, you run into certain sort of chicken and egg type challenges. And over breakfast, you both mentioned the importance of seeing the scale up of renewable electrical sources and grids for you to be able to do what you can then do with your own facilities. How do you feel that's going in the debate, national level, European level, globally, on some of the challenges with permitting, some of the challenges with value chains?
I think we're a little bit too used to that we have electricity at home, if I put it like that. Our friends at OECD was looking at the difference between policies and what has been implemented. It was a quite interesting report, and we can say that practically every country in Europe is lagging behind their plans. Miguel already mentioned about clean energy, renewable energy, grids, and that is not happening at all with the pace that is required. So if that is not in place, well, a lot of the other things will not come about, right? And there is a lot of permitting process in that. My native country, Sweden, it used to take at least 12 years to get a new piece of grid in place, right? doesn't fly here, right?
The numbers are still like that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. We in the south of Spain, we have the challenge now to profit the sun and the wind. But the problem that we are seeing today is that still we have exactly the same problems, not in my backyard. And it's impossible. We need to have, obviously, a strategic development of the renewable solution, of the renewable power production, because if we don't have renewable power production, we are not going to succeed in the energy transition. It's the base of the whole energy transition. So we have to convince our communities that we need the terrains in order to install the new renewable power production projects. And with renewable power production, we are going to be self-energy consumers, and we are going to gain independency, and we are going to reduce the price of this power production. And with reduced price power production, green hydrogen are going to be there, new combustibles are going to be there, new sustainable aviation fuel are going to be there, and new marine combustible are going to be there. So let's move to that. But we need, as you have said this morning, a close cooperation with the governments and the government agencies in order to develop the infrastructures. We need a good distribution net. National grids are extremely important in order to assure that this renewable power production arrives to all the production sites. So it's completely required a close cooperation with governments in order to facilitate the permitting, in order to impulse the understanding of the stakeholders and the communities, and in order to develop as fast as possible the distribution, the new national grids that we require for the energy transition. And again, not in my backyard is not the right policy.
No.
Just to mention a figure here, if you look at green hydrogen production in Europe, roughly 80% of the cost is the cost of electricity today. And it's extremely expensive. And it's very far away from these visions about 1 or 2 euro per kilogram of hydrogen. We are not there, right? At the best, we are at 8 or something like that. And the development of for example, PEM electrolyzer, solid oxide electrolyzer, and so that's fine, and that is going on. But that cannot compensate for these high electricity prices. No chance. And then back to what we say about government. Government have to fix these things, and might also be that not only talking about capex but about opex somehow, which is much more difficult for governments and funding bodies.
Yes. Now, I'm not saying that the US has fixed its renewables permitting challenges either, but what has the signal of the US IRA, do you think, been to governments in the countries where you're working? Obviously you have business in the US too, but and how has that helped move forward the debate with government?
What I can say is what you so very well captured, Jess. It's simplicity, and there is not a. You have the sliding scale, so it's not religious about if I use these colors. I'm not a fan of these colors, as you might know. but that we can find solutions for it, and I think that look how fast they managed to implement these things and get projects up running on large scale. As I mentioned, we put in 1.8 billion into a project and as part of a project, right? That's big stuff happening. So it has been a what should we say, a forthcoming bureaucracy around it. But then, of course, it's extremely important, as you also mentioned, about the predictability, and we feel that this is stable over time.
Yeah.
So it doesn't change when if there's a new whatever government administration or anything like that. That is a long-term commitment, and of course that in talking about Europe, that we have the same system across also, so you don't have all these local games going on, right?
What have you at Cepsa thought about the IRA and discussed about that with governments who you talk to around in other jurisdictions?
We think that we cannot miss this opportunity, so we cannot permit ourselves to move renewable projects to US. We need to develop them in Europe. So we have to copy, and we have to copy the simplicity, and we have to copy the focus on renewable energy and energy supplies. So we need to do as much as we can as Europe in order not to miss this wave. And we cannot miss it. We cannot assume the failure in this big project of energy transition. So we have to copy the simplicity, and we have to copy the objective, and we don't want to permit that these renewable powers projects will move to other geographies. We have to remain strong in developing the renewable power production and new combustibles in Europe in order to maintain our independence.
Joachim, you wanted to come in, or yes?
Well, I think it's important that when we look at these kind of things that we have focused large-scale actions at certain places. That is doesn't get thinned out too much. When you talk about hydrogen, let's make a very simple and important observation. It's very difficult to transport hydrogen. You produce it, you use it. If you want to transport anything, you should transport CO2. That's pretty easy to. So we need to, and Cepsa is a great example of this. Hubs, valleys, something like that, and have a concentration of funding supporting this type of development.
Mm-hmm. That raises two topics, I think. One is, of course, the combined judgment call of a business and a government about which valley, which is a fairly political question. And the other is the finance. You mentioned not just CapEx, but also OpEx. Fundamentally, profitability. I was talking to a friend from one of the big wind OEMs who said, we don't want new facilities, we want profitability from our existing facilities. And I suspected you two would both. What are the challenges then, as we talk about the realism, getting sober as we implement, as we have done and we've discovered the ways in which it's difficult? What are the challenges particularly around finance and profitability at the moment?
I think that our challenge is to maintain fossil supply to fossil clients today, and to transform at the same way that the marketplace are going to be transformed. So we have to closely follow up the market in order to transform our products, at least in oil and gas, to transform to our products as faster as the clients are going to require it. This is the first way to maintain profitability. Also, we are going to use the self-consumption of hydrogen in order to impulse this new technology. Because if you don't have self-consumption, you are not going to be able to scale up the technology. So we are going to profit the self-consumption in order to be the first to transform. And after, with this transformation of the self-consumption, we are going to attract other clients in order to scale up the hub. This is more or less the strategy. And as Joachim has said before, we have to use all the levers. It's not only hydrogen. We have to use biogas. We have to use biocombustibles. We have to use energy efficiency. All the days I wake up, I told my boss, we need to continue to invest on energy efficiency, because the best electron is the electron not used. So it's the first thing that we have to do, to reduce our energy consumption, and with the rest to transform into renewables. So let's try to use the self-consumption that we have in our hubs in order to gain scale up and to convince our external clients we are able to do these projects. So please come here and we are going to build together a new economy.
Certainly the best way to convince the clients is to say, we believe it in ourselves to the point of implementing it.
And,
Yes.
and there is, I mean, two observations. One, if you have an SMR and you produce hydrogen from natural gas, you have higher CO2 emissions from that hydrogen than if you would have used the natural gas directly for that purpose. So we need to change that, which Cepsa is a great example of that. So we need to do that first, move from grey to green. I wrote this chapter about China in the book, Touching a Hydrogen Future, and I call it From Biggest in Grey to Biggest in Green. I think it will happen there, and it has to happen here as well. So we need to take that piece, and as Miguel says, with a great example how they are working, leverage that, inspire that, and attract clients to it. Second, there's no lack of money. If you and I've been in discussions in different contexts with banks, and I met with a big Dutch bank with 3 letters a couple of weeks ago, and just confirming the same thing, right? There's no lack of money that is available. The banks, the different investment funds, and etc. They're very happy, but they don't find the bankable projects.
Yes.
So the money is there. It's kind of burning in their pockets, and some of them it seems, but they are not prepared to go ahead. And we also see that we need to find projects where multiple banks are involved. They want, of course, to be 3 or 4 or more of them working together on this. But then we need good projects. And I think we are on the way. I mean, we are looking now at about 300 projects around the world, screened projects. When we started with 3,000 or whatever, and we are boiling that further down, of course. But there is a piece of the government funding, capex, opex, preferably finding these valleys and stuff like that, and create a bankable project. I don't think there is any problem to find money. We see in the Middle East. Things are cooking, so to speak.
During the year 2022, we have obtained our first green financial utility using 20 different banks from the whole Europe, 2 billion, in order to invest and to impulse our energy transition. And believe me, it has taken almost 6 months in order to convince 20 different banks that our plans are serious. So now that we have convinced them that are serious, we have to demonstrate that we are doing the right actions. So it's true that this money, it's not easy to obtain this money. It's not easy to convince 20 or 13 or 15 different banks to convince them to impulse the energy transition of the company. But if you convince them, the most critical thing is to be sure that we don't miss our goals and we comply with our pathway. The best way to impulse it is to demonstrate that we are doing the right things.
So promising strong outcomes, but not over-promising.
Exactly.
This is the best news I've heard in a while,
Exactly.
Miguel. 20 banks, and 6 months sounds to me, quite a short time to have achieved that. Yeah. And the key is, of course, once they've done it once and you've delivered, this will be so much easier to do again.
But also, when we look at this, and maybe it sounds like I'm speaking from a biased point of view, but with all due respect to startup companies and so on, it is the bigger companies that are possible to have the possibility to take the lead and working together. We see that, and there could be also very nice combinations. I think a word nowadays coming back again, I would say, is symbiosis. And we can see we can see production of green hydrogen, we can see carbon capture and utilization. That utilization is with the neighbors and so on. And that is typically big companies coming together and then getting government funding, going to the banks, acting as examples, but also acting as the ones where we can then add the smaller companies as off-takers around, as with the Cepsa projects in Spain, for example.
That then starts to address something you've both hinted at, but particularly, Miguel, you said the challenge of moving at the pace of the market.
Exactly.
Who is sending that signal of pace? Where is the coordination factor? To some extent, it's big companies coming together and saying, okay, we're confident in one another at the level of this project, and we set a pace. What additional can government policies bring to that challenge?
Our experience is that our clients are eager to sign alliances in order to assure that they are going to have the renewable combustible that they need for the energy transition project. But again, some kind of government support, it will be very much appreciated in order to impulse these alliances. The energy transition, we have to work on the whole value chain. Suppliers, producers, and final clients. We have to work all together. And our feeling is that for the government, it's much easier to go to the big companies, to the big energy companies, like the new cash cow, instead of going to the final clients. Obviously, final clients are boats, so it's more difficult for them. But if we want to succeed in the energy transition, we have to work together in the whole value chain. So to create alliance with suppliers, technology suppliers, equipment suppliers, and to create alliance with final client, like, for example, the alliances that we are impulsing with British Airways, with Bay Area, with Air Nostrum, in order to develop the new sustainable aviation fuel solutions in Spain. That is very important for our market. Alliances with marine shipping companies is extremely important. Alliances with heavy road transportation companies is very important. So we are all committed, but some kind of government support from Europe, it's extremely important.
We see something happening more and more, and that is that the market, the takers, are prepared to sign up for making it happen. Right? We see signed agreements of the longest I've seen now is 7 years. We are prepared to buy from you for 7 years from a plant that does not exist yet.
Yes.
So I think this is coming around actually, but we need the other piece, right? So the governments and a sustainability in that, predictability.
Do you feel you're able to communicate that need? I mean, this is where listening to people like Lamy and others, I hear them, they understand the question, but they don't have experience of directly running businesses that are making these decisions together with other businesses on a commercial basis. How good is the communication?
Yeah, and how good is the understanding? I think,
absolutely, yes.
I think we definitely can improve a lot when it comes to communication and in a good way educate. I think it's better. Again, taking my 3-year perspective, it's way better now. 3 years ago, everyone thought about hydrogen. All right, hydrogen, that is natural gas minus CO2 emissions. It's not, right? It's something completely different. And they thought, oh, you can use it everywhere. No, you can use it for some things. That's great, but not for other things. And we think we have reached certain points, but still, I think that there is the understanding could be better. It could be better to understand what are the fundamentals back to. I mean, the real backbone for a lot of this, we already discussed it, is that we have renewable electrons, viable renewable electrons. And you can talk as much as you want about these other things. If you don't get that you have to get in place first when it comes to. And I think that many politicians across Europe and other places, they have jumped ahead and don't understand that maybe we need to focus here first. And that process we need to help. And it's on its way, I would say. It's better now than in the past, but still.
Permit me one example. When I remember the first meeting with these 20 banks was to explain them what is scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3.
Interesting. Yeah.
In this auditorium, probably 100% of the people understand these concepts, but the people that has to borrow you the money, they didn't understand this concept. So I remember that the first meeting was 2 hours meeting, explaining then what is scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3, and why CO2 is related with the climate change. So training, it's very important. And permit me is just only an example, but we have to do exactly the same with the government agencies. There is excellent technicians, but probably we need to do exactly the same training with the government agencies in order to make them understand how important is electricity in this energy transition process, how important is to maintain our commitment with present and future clients. And we need training, we need time, and it are not going to happen tomorrow. We have to do gradually, and it's very important not only to have the training tools, but also to have the training time from their time, to be open to receive this kind of information.
Are you inviting people from banks? Are you inviting policymakers to visit projects? I mean, do you have a proactive education? Yes. Okay.
In the good way, as Joachim has said, obviously, but you know, they have many things to do. So it's important to be focused.
I think they are improving. I mean, some I talk to are also have very good understanding. So it's a mix. It's a mix there for sure.
Would you include in that process? Robin mentioned, you know, the climate movement is now a political force, and there are many protesters. And I know some of them, and one of their challenges is it's relatively easy to protest something. It's much harder to advocate the solutions, particularly when you're talking the transition to clean energy because of its heterogeneity. I mean, the orders of magnitude, as we know, get very, very large. They're probably quite keen, some of them, also to understand more about what the solutions look like. Now, that's a big ask to companies, and clearly governments play an important role, but there's another communication front there. Because if the environmental movement, broadly understood, stays in a world of protest and maximum green standards with not so much understanding of the transition to that, you know, green hydrogen must be temporal and locational and additional. That could put off investment if it's really that stringent. What do you think about that conversation? Do you now see that as part of the job description, the challenge?
No, definitely. We need to engage more. We need to engage more. And I will say, if you go back in time where the power of these groups was more limited, I think it was okay to demand. I think they did a great job by pushing there. It was a threat that was driving things forward. That's great. But if these people then come into power without having the experience, and we have seen that in some countries, then it can be quite difficult instead, because it's, again, as you say, it's one thing to protest, and it's another thing, how do I resolve this? You know? So you can be that force pushing, but if you really come into decision making, then you need to have a broader understanding, and I think we are doing, but we can do more in that engagement, definitely on different levels, for sure.
Miguel, you look
in order to have a good communication, it's is a double way process. So we are completely open to communicate, but the other part has to be completely open to receive this information and to interchange in an open mind basis. Our wind project, our last wind project, we received 2,300 allegations from green organizations. 19% of them were copy, pass and copy, pass and copy. But we have to answer the 2,300. You have to. Even if they are paste and copy, you have to answer the 2,300 allegations. It's the process. So we need to have this two-way conversation, but we have to be open both sides of the table.
I think we also have to take more of the first step, because we might be viewed a little bit negative, so they think that they can talk to us. I think we're quite approachable people, but we try to get out as schools, universities, and so on. But we should do, of course, much more. But you feel a lot of momentum, right? And I used to work with the steel industry, and we've never been so, what should we say, popular as today, right? And we can turn that into something positive. And I'm very happy to see that there are a lot of females that take this on also. A lot of engagement, and to translate that into positive actions, right?
Yes, let us look at the real positive of the energy crisis, which is, and the climate crisis, which is that we've got young people wanting to work in the field, and we've got heads of government paying close attention to the energy sector. Probably neither of those was true 10 years ago. That's a different experience for energy companies compared to being quietly getting on with the business amongst the professionals. Yeah, okay. Echoing just one last question to you in the back of all of this is how we move from the not in my backyard, which I guess is what most of your 2,000 letters was, to the yes in my backyard enthusiasm, from communities, from municipalities, to say we want to be part of the green transition because we see it as prosperity. We see it as jobs. How do you think the Valley project will help with that, Miguel? And do you have examples of that, Joachim, from anywhere in the world, really? Global examples would be welcome.
Demonstrating that we are going to be able to develop zero carbon footprint combustibles. Demonstrating that we are continuing to invest on the region. Demonstrating that we are completely open to comply with all the environmental and social regulations. Being proactive is the only way, with the example, is the best way to move the stakeholders in the same direction. But again, energy transition has to be common goal. Has all the citizens has to be involved on that process. We have to do our best in every single action that we do day by day.
Joachim.
It's about ownership. It's about local ownership, feeling that you're part of that thing, right? So we need certain things top down, frameworks, policies, and so on. But we need to work on that other piece. So this is we are proud of our local ecosystem here, so to speak, right? So we collect the waste from our households, and we transform that into sustainable aviation fuel here. That is what we are doing. We put up this plant producing, let's say, green hydrogen, and that had one big off-taker, and then with all our connections, we managed to attract other companies to come here. It's our thing. It doesn't come from Davos. It doesn't come from Brussels. It doesn't come from Berlin. It doesn't come from London, right? These guys are in London and Brussels, etc. They are there to give the framework, but we have to create this ownership around it, and then I think it can be yes in my backyard.
Okay. So in addition to the national policies, the local politics with a small p. Communities.
And I see at many places very enthusiastic people there, and they get engagement with it. Not everywhere, but saying that this is an opportunity for us. It's not a problem, it's an opportunity. So particularly if you're a bit further out in the provinces, so to speak, of course.
Thank you. I think you've kicked us off with a lot of themes. Some things have been done and are happening. I like very much your 20 banks. And that brings us to a next phase of challenges. And I keep hearing versions of the word proactive here. From government, from businesses, in communication as well as initiating projects. I think those topics will come up again and again. But for the moment, we have a brief coffee break so that everybody can refresh the level of caffeine before we come back and dig into some of the topics. Miguel, Joachim, thank you very much.
Thank you.